Good day, everybody, and welcome to the MioNMA podcast, talking about UFC 306, aka UFC Noche, from the Vegas Sphere. And, it's probably going to be a pretty, impressive event. We also have a KSW card coming up as well as Bellator, but I'm not going to talk really much about either because I looked at the cards and couldn't really come up with much. I do apologize if you hear a scraping noise in the background. My landlords upstairs are doing something, and I don't know when it is going to end. So rather than just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, let's get this out of the way. Let's put up with it, and hopefully, ideally, we don't hear it. Or you don't hear it. That's the ideal outcome of this particular situation. So let's quickly talk about Bellator because I do have some thoughts. This is a Bellator Championship Series card from London, England. It is not a very good one. The main event is Leah McCourt versus Sarah Collins, a battle of I don't want to say up-and-comers because they're both in their 30s. They're not really prospects. They're McCourt's 32 and 34 for Collins, but people who are relatively new to the MMA scene with a relatively reasonable background and other things, both of which have a grappling background. I shouldn't actually say that McCourt's all that new. She's been around for about 10 years. It's just she's been fairly inactive. She's been a pro for 7 years and has wrapped up only 11 fights. That's pretty low. And Sarah Collins, of course, is a pretty credentialed judoka who was inspired by Ronda Rousey to take up MMA. I'm going with Collins. At the end of the day, McCourt is a more well-rounded fighter. She has a stand-up game to speak of, and Collins does not. But at the end of the day, she is usually willing to embrace the clinch, usually willing to participate in a grappling exchange with someone, and competing with a essentially sort of Australian equivalent of Ronda Rousey on the ground seems like a pretty bad idea. Giving Collins her game seems like a bad approach to handling a featherweight fight. So I'm going to go with Collins, but it wouldn't surprise me if McCourt did otherwise. She just has more options. She's a more competent and comfortable striker. So if she just elects to kind of come up with a game plan that works for her, it's very, very winnable in that regard. Then we have a pair of 205 fights between Simeon Powell and Rafael Xavier and Luke Trainer versus, gonna take a stab at this, Laureanis Urbanavicius. I'm pretty confident on the last name, actually, Urbanavicius. I'm not confident on the first name. I'm not familiar with Simeon Powell, who is lost to Jacob Nadeau in BFL Europe. Okay. 9-1 fighter. I'm assuming set up to win here, being in a co-main event against a 13-7 fighter. I honestly can't say that I know a lot about that, but Luke Trainer, I do know a fair bit about, and I've been fairly impressed with what he's been doing. His win over Grant Neal recently was pretty cool. He also defeated Sullivan Cauley, who I think is a fairly reasonable fighter, so that's pretty cool. But he does have that random loss to Simon Biong over in Bellator, and Biong is not very good. And if you need kind of a proof of that, realize that Biong has gone 1-3 since then and has looked pretty bad against Yag Shamirodov and Antonio Carlos Jr. That being said, I still am going to pick Luke Trainer. I don't know enough about Urbanavicius to really pick him to win here. He's 36 years old, fairly older fighter in terms of MMA terms. And, 14-1, very, very impressive, but very can crusher. His last win back in 2021 or 2022, pardon me, is against a 0-0 fighter. And before that, it's Ildemar Alcantara. And Ildemar Alcantara is the high water mark of his career. So I've got Luke Trainer, who is just, someone I feel pretty positive about, who has a fairly decent game, 28 years old, 6'6", really, really tall, 81 inches, and pretty competent grappler. He's got a good back take game, and he does things on the ground that are pretty nice. So I got him. Mark Diakese makes his Bellator debut against Tim Wilde. That's a pretty easy pick for Diakese. He's a way better athlete than Wilde or anything that Wilde has really ever beaten before. So I got to take him. I mean, outside of the UFC, Diakese should be pretty damn good, if we're being honest. Pretty good. And then Archie Colgan versus a person who has actually beaten Tim Wilde, Manuel Souza. I am going to go with Archie Colgan. Archie Colgan's a really, really talented wrestler, like very, very good, very athletic, 10-0 fighter. He is 29 years old, so a little bit old to be a prospect, but 5'9", 69.5-inch reach. Beat Thibaut Gauthier last time out. Beat Emmanuel Sanchez a little bit before that. He's really quite good. I mean, the only concern I guess would be is that even at a relatively low level, he's not finishing people. So like it's very decision oriented, but very, very solid wrestler, top control person. Mike Shipman is fighting Islam Abu Basset, who I just hope will kind of like have an exciting fight with him because Mike Shipman's a good like action fighter and that's going to be fun. Probably Mike Shipman probably should take that. And then I just do not really care about the rest of this. I mean, I know that there are some people that are being discussed, but I've just not sunk my teeth into like a Kieran Clark or a Dara Kelly as being like actually particularly good. So I'm gonna have to pass on same like a Stephen Hill or a Joseph Luciano. It's just, I don't know. I don't know them enough. And the Noche card really took center stage in the lead up to this. So let's talk about the Noche card. So UFC Noche is here. It's at the Sphere. This is the first UFC event at the Sphere, I do believe. And this is going to be like a big pageantry thing. And I appreciate that. I was a big fan of Pride back in the day. I am also a big pro wrestling fan. So I appreciate the pageantry and the presentation of a combat sports event to actually be, you know, something that stands out. It's sort of why I don't really like the Apex cards, is because they always have a very same feel, and it's why I haven't really liked the UFC product from a presentation standpoint for some time. There's not really an effort to be different or creative. That includes like things like the fighter uniforms not being like different time to time. And you know, I miss the days of like, you know, the various different shorts that were on display. Like I know it's not much. I know it's not a lot. But the idea of letting fighters actually have like a little bit of personality is something I do miss. Quick note here on the fight picks, though. I am going to be giving you betting advice in terms of talking about odds and talking about my own betting. But like, I encourage people to bet very, very little on MMA. Why? Because, well, I don't want to be responsible for you losing money, for number one. But number two, this is a chaotic environment and not a path to financial freedom. This is not where you're going to go and drop like 5 figures and come away happy with the result. That is my personal opinion. I keep it small, and that is how you add a little bit of extra spice to your viewing pleasure. So let us talk about UFC 306, UFC Noche, and let's start off with like sort of the problems of the matter here. I have no doubt that this fight card is going to make a lot of money, but like it is because it's the ESPN deal and so on. Like the UFC has been able to be very lazy and not especially good at its job and make bucket loads of money. And this card is no exception. That being said, the fact that you have a main event that involves no Mexican fighters for Mexican Independence Day, a little bit lame. And on top of that, I don't think that this is a great card. It would be one thing if it was like a love letter to like Mexican MMA, obviously, like you're putting Mexicans in top to bottom, boom, 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 boom. But like that involves the main event going, you know, with somebody who is not Sean O'Malley. That would be my thoughts on the matter. So don't get me wrong. There are some like absolutely burner fights here. The main event, the co-main event are good. Diego Lopez versus Brian Ortega. That's good. Looking forward enough to Daniel Zellhuber versus Esteban Ribovic. But like, you also have like a main card fight between Rolando Rodriguez and Ode Osborne that I don't have great thoughts on. And on the undercard, you have fights between Yasmin Hauergui and Ketlin Souza, which just seems like it doesn't really do anything. And then also like I'm not on the Raul Rosas hype train, so that like fight doesn't really appeal. And then Edgar Shirez versus Joshua Van is another fight that doesn't really like do a lot and also seems unneededly risky. And you've also only got 10 fights, which, you know, I don't have a problem with like a shorter high quality card, but for a pay-per-view that you're asking for a lot of money for, and, you know, astronomical ticket prices, you're only getting 10 fights. And like I said, about half the card just doesn't feel like that big fight UFC feel to it. You know, it's not bad. It's not bad. There's no fight on here that I'm like dreading or not happy with. But the undercard has a couple of like not really insightful fights. And even the main card kind of has that, because I don't think Zellhuber Ribovic, even though I'm looking forward to it, is an insightful fight. I don't think Rodriguez Osborne is. So you kind of got a 3 strong fight main card. And then on the undercard, you've got, Bahamontes Torres is a banger. That's a good undercard fight. Aldana Dumas has divisional relevance, but I don't actually think it's going to be a spectacular fight. And then the 3 bottom ones are kind of like not really doing it for me. Again, not bad fights, not a bad card, but also not the stacked once in a lifetime thing that the UFC is trying to make it out to be. But hey, I guess promoters do lie, and I've been saying that for a long time, that we should just expect that. So let's move on. Let's get into the fights here. Main event, we've got Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili defending his bantamweight UFC title. O'Malley, that is the champion coming in. Dvalishvili, the challenger. There you go. O'Malley, of course, winning the belt off of Dvalishvili's teammate Aljamain Sterling. So, there is that storyline here. I think this is a fight that is kind of fascinating to think about, but it's not necessarily fascinating in practice. And what I mean by that is that, yes, this is it's a big question mark fight, because for O'Malley, he's facing a dedicated grappler, wrestler, pace guy who, though he has some fights where he doesn't do this, is a fairly dedicated pressure fighter, and I'm hoping he does that here. And that's something that we haven't really seen from O'Malley before. Honestly, we sort of were supposed to have that with Aljamain Sterling, but the fight didn't turn out that way. It didn't get to that point. So you have the big question here of hey, you've got Sean O'Malley. He's a good boxer by MMA standards. He's a creative striker, works in combination, has good power, has good speed, has this larger than life personality. And he's being asked you know what? Here is a mad Georgian wrestler. What do you do with that? And that feels like a really interesting challenge. And on the flip side of the coin, Sean O'Malley is a far longer range fighter than anyone that Merab Dvalishvili has fought. I went through Merab's UFC opponents, and here's the deal. Terrion Ware at 5'8", 71 inches, is the longest reach fighter that Merab Dvalishvili has fought in the UFC. In Sean O'Malley, he's facing a 5'11", 72-inch reach fighter. That's an incredible expansion. I know it's only 1 inch in reach, but it's also 3 inches in height. And a guy who has way more of a style and physicality beyond just the frame to utilize an outside game than Terrion Ware. Terrion Ware, a guy I had a lot of respect for, don't get me wrong. Fantastically tough guy, good problem solver, scrappy as all hell, but physically limited. And Sean O'Malley is not that. He is pretty evasive. He does have power. He does have the ability to sting. He does have hand speed. He does have power. He has the ability to, become a UFC champion. Whereas Terrion Ware is a guy who I don't think even won a fight in the UFC. I could be mistaken. Am I forgetting one? Maybe. Terrion Ware, where are you? There you are. Terrion Ware. Yeah, let's see here. Looking back at his UFC run. Yeah, lost to Cody Stamon, Sean O'Malley, Tom Duquesnoy, and Merab Dvalishvili. That's not bad. That is a very, very good group there. You've got 2 guys fighting for the belt, and then Stamen, who's been a pretty solid part of it, and Duquesnoy was a highly hyped up prospect, but then lost to Jordan Winsky and Dennis Purich and Albert Morales. Has never really beaten anyone particularly good. Looking at his record here, his best wins are journeyman, veteran, high loss guys like Jared Papazian and Nick Mamalis. Probably. I'm not really seeing anything else. There's a couple other decent looking records, but I'd have to dig through them to see if they're actually any good. But anyways, enough about Terrion Ware, even though he's a guy who I think needs a little bit more love than he actually usually gets. We are dealing with that that concept of a fight that we've not seen before. There is no fight of Sean O'Malley's you can go and look and have it be predictive of this. There is no fight that Terrion or that Merab Dvalishvili has that you can go and watch and be predictive about this. So it's fascinating in that regard. The problem is that in practice, it's probably going to be one of 2 things. Option A, Sean O'Malley is able to punish Merab Dvalishvili coming into the pocket and trying to set up his wrestling and hurts him, either finishing him or hurting him enough that the fight goes his way on like damage, big moments. You know, he can do it 3 out of 5 rounds where he hurts Merab bad enough to win them. Option 2 is Merab can, in fact, implement his wrestling and dominate that way. Not in the sense of like getting takedowns and holding Sean O'Malley down. O'Malley is a good scrambler. We've seen that. You know, he's not like easy to take down, and he's not easy to hold down. But Merab has a pace and a blind obsession with getting takedowns at times. Keep in mind, this is a guy who fought Peter Yan, and I think he shot something like 49 takedowns in a 25-minute fight. It's insane. It is insane. Didn't get a lot of them, but like was able to completely smother Peter Yan just by shooting over and over and over again. Being like, okay, you want to strike with me? Good luck with that. And he can do something similar to like Sean O'Malley and make it kind of a dull fight there, which makes it kind of a 2-true outcome fight. And then I guess there's a third outcome, which is like that Merab just kind of does what Aljamain Sterling did and just can't ever get the pressure going and just kind of sits on the outside and gets, I mean, I imagine he would get wrecked doing that. I imagine. Like, there's no way you should be sitting on the outside with Sean O'Malley, regardless of who you are in the division, never mind someone like Merab Dvalishvili, who doesn't really have a competent striking game. Like, he is, for a title challenger at bantamweight, his striking is pretty darn undercooked. So that would seem like a really, really bad idea. The most interesting version of this fight would be something like option 2, where like Merab is able to get his wrestling going and do his thing and do Merab things, but O'Malley is also able to hurt him back at some point, maybe on the come in, and then we get some drama. We get some ideas of like, well, we're going through this round, and yeah, sure, Merab controlled 3.5 minutes of it with his wrestling and did his thing, but there was like for about 15 seconds there where he was like getting lit up and got really hurt, maybe got dropped or something. And that round has to go to Sean O'Malley. And we got a little bit of like that in like every single round, maybe without the drops. Obviously, if O'Malley drops Merab in every single round, that will be a problem for Merab. that will just become like, ref, are you going to stop this pretty quickly? But that could be interesting. But I have a feeling that it's going to go one of the other two ways. Either Merab's wrestling is going to start to really dominate the fight, or O'Malley can keep the range, utilize his exceptional reach advantage. Again, he is 5 inches taller and 4 inches longer. That's a lot. To make this into kind of like a relatively low strike version of like his fight with Marlon Vera. Boom, Cheeto. And those are the two more likely options I see. So I'm going to go with Dvalishvili. I just think that there is like a freakishness to Dvalishvili that O'Malley will not be ready for, because finding somebody who will actually replicate what he does is fairly insane. Whereas I think that preparing for O'Malley's height is something that obviously with the Sarah Longo guys, or I guess Longo Weidman guys, didn't really do well for Aljamain Sterling, and I guess that's a really big concern. But one would hope that they have learned from that and that they have crafted a better game plan and better training help to get him ready for just the fact that you are going to be getting hit from a range that you can't respond from. And that can be very, very mentally taxing, as well as the obvious physical taxation of it. You're getting hit with no response. So there you go. I think the thing here is that a lot of people who are picking O'Malley very, very confidently, like if you're like, I'm nervous about it, but I'm picking O'Malley, I was right there with you. I was thinking about it. It was on my mind. But like, there are a lot of people putting up highlights of like Marlon Moraes and Henry Cejudo rocking Merab Dvalishvili and saying, well, guys, this is clearly the end for Merab. He's gonna get wrecked here. He's gonna get destroyed. And it's like, those are all things that Sean O'Malley doesn't do. Like those shots tend to be hooks. They tend to be from outside the shot with the left hand. And that's just not what O'Malley does. Like, O'Malley's creative and probably a better striker than either of them. Definitely a better striker than Cejudo. But it's just a very, very different kind of it. It's not like a one-shot KO artistry. and it's a little bit more straight, which makes sense because he's trying to make use of his reach in terms of punches, and that doesn't seem to be the thing that actually perturbs Merab Dvalishvili or hurts him quite that much. So, like I said, going with Dvalishvili, I just think that there is a better way to prep for O'Malley than there is for Dvalishvili. And that is my thoughts on the matter. I was expecting O'Malley to be the favorite here, just because he's the popular one, he's the defending champion, so on. You don't usually see a challenger, particularly one that is against somebody who's got a serious like social media presence and following, being the underdog. But that's the case. Merab coming in at minus 132 to minus 145. O'Malley plus 107 to plus 122. I'm pretty surprised. That's probably the most surprising line of the card. There's another one later on that also does kind of surprise me, but still. Alexa Grasso, Valentina Shevchenko, number 3. I do feel like we have to go full disclosure here. I don't like Valentina Shevchenko. I never have. Her fighting style to me always I thought was like undercooked, ironically. Like it took her to the title and I wasn't surprised by that at all because she is a physical freak. She is a destroyer of worlds. She has the strength, the power, the durability, the cardio, the aggression to be a very, very good fighter. And that's why she was a long-time women's flyweight champion. But I was always underimpressed by her problem solving and her ability to be something that is not just a bully. I guess it kind of happened with the Amanda Nunes fights, which were like pretty close. But like almost every other fight, it's like, I have the advantage on the outside striking. I'm talking as if I'm Valentina here. And I don't like actually doing it. And I usually have the advantage in the boxing, but I also don't like doing that. So I tend to clinch and like head and arm throw my way to victory. And it's like, it's the dumbest, most like brute force application of her skill set possible. And I just never really got down with it. Now, to be clear, I have a remarkably good record picking Shevchenko fights. So this is not one of those cases of like, we're talking about somebody that I'm bad at picking. I think, I could be wrong here. When have I been wrong about her fights? I think I probably picked Sarah Coppin to beat her, just thinking that Coppin was a little bit too big, because Coppin's a fairly large bantamweight, and Shevchenko was a flyweight, a flyweight coming up to bantamweight. So I probably did then, and I would have picked Amanda Nunes to beat her both times, which she did. But I picked Shevchenko to beat Holly Holm. I picked her to beat Juliana Pena. I picked her to beat Priscilla Cachoeira. Joanna Jacek, Jessica Ai, Liz Carmouche, Ketlin Seminara, a.k.a. Shukagian, Jennifer Maia, Jessica Andrade, Lauren Murphy, Tyler Santos. I even picked her to beat Alexa Grasso the first time, and she did not. So when I say that, when I'm giving this disclosure, it's just you're going to get kind of a negative tone when I'm talking about her. Not so much a like bad breakdown. And this is the thing, is that she's the better range striker than Grasso. If she can keep it at range, she actually can probably win the fight. But like, if you recall, with both Jennifer Maia and Tyler Santos and even Grasso in the previous fights, that was something that people who were betting on her were asking her to do in every single one of those situations. And she did not. she did not. She's not actually, like, she's a talented outside striker, has the physical attributes for it and so on, but is not actually confident, comfortable. Maybe not confident may not be the word, but comfortable doing it. So she ended up always like crashing into Grasso and clinching with her. And she did it with Santos and Maia as well. And even though with Santos and Maia, that was like the best parts of her game. And with Grasso, whenever she could make it a prolonged clinch thing, it became very uncomfortable for Shevchenko. And obviously coming in meant that there was periods where Grasso got to use her superior pocket boxing and combinations to beat up on Shevchenko and get big moments, dropping her in the second round of the second fight and also hurting her a couple other times, although not to the same degree. And on the ground, Grasso just doesn't give her any respect and like refuses to be bullied. Like that's essentially it. Grasso is someone who physically is not on the same par of Shevchenko, but has the spirit and the stick-to-itiveness and is a good enough athlete that she just doesn't accept Shevchenko bullying her. And the big problem, of course, is that, well, two things. one, Shevchenko still believes that she won the second fight, and she doesn't seem to have any she doesn't seem to have any idea that she has to change things. She's not adaptive, whereas Grasso is game planning like specifically every time out to beat Shevchenko, and it appeared honestly to be thinking about and said that she was thinking about ways to beat Shevchenko before they were even booked. Like this is she's the more adaptable younger fighter, and like that's kind of a problem. Like it's hard to pick the older fighter in a trilogy fight of a fight that or of a series that, in my opinion, she's down 0-2 in. Like that second fight was, shouldn't have been a draw for sure. And I suppose it could have been a draw. You go 10-8 second round for Grasso, and then you give Grasso one of the other rounds. Probably the fourth. Well, no, probably the fifth. Give her the fifth, give her the second with a 10-8, and then give 1, 3, and 4 to Valentina. I guess you have it. But like the only reason it was a draw was Judge Michael Bell, scoring around 10-8 that had no business being 10-8. And especially if you're going to give it 10-8, you really needed to give the second round 10-8 to Grasso. You really needed that. So like it was only a kind of a botched scorecard that got us a draw in the first place. And most people, I think, had Grasso winning. I know I did. I had a 48-47 Grasso. So you've got the younger fighter theoretically up with a finish and a theoretical decision win. And you have a fighter who is getting older, losing some of the physical attributes that was really required, has been at this for like 20 years of professional combat experience, and facing an opponent who seems to have their number. You've got to go with Grasso here. There is a version of this fight that absolutely Shevchenko wins. There are two versions. One is that she actually regroups and becomes like a ranged kickboxer, because Grasso can't really seem to actually compete with her at the outside striking range, and doesn't seem to really have the physical tools to like force the pocket onto Shevchenko. So like that feels like an actually winning policy. And then the other one, I guess, is just Shevchenko goes in and does her head and arm throw thing and happens to be strong enough and comfortable enough with a scrappy Grasso that like she just wins. So it's weird. It's a weird thing because I feel very much like the trend and the circumstances really mean I have to pick Grasso. But at the same time, like I have two really easy ways for this to be a win for Shevchenko. It's a bit weird in that regard. But anyways, I'm picking Grasso by decision. She's minus 135 to minus 140. Shevchenko plus 110 to plus 118 to win back her title. Then we have Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez. Should be a barn burner. Two very aggressive fighters, both on the feet and on the ground. I am expecting Diego Lopez to have a lot of early success just because Brian Ortega does start slow. A little bit flat-footed, a little bit prone to being kind of aggressed upon. Like a guy who famously, got to like a 7-fight unbeaten streak in the UFC because he got busted for PEDs against Mike Bellator. So I can't say 7-0, but he was 6-0 with a no contest without actually winning a round in the UFC. So one would think that Lopez will get off to a hot start here with his very aggressive striking, very aggressive grappling game, and win early. But I see Ortega, who is famously durable, despite the fact that his body appears to be falling apart and his defensive limitations. But like he is a dynamic finisher with submissions. He is a brutally hard punishing top game guy, and he's improving an ability to actually control a fight. I feel like Nunes or Lopez will start to slow down a little bit because he usually does. And then Ortega will get his opportunities because like the problem is that you can slow down against Ortega and theoretically do something because he's not a great takedown artist. But at the same time, Lopez doesn't have an off switch. Like Lopez slows down while maintaining the same kind of aggression that leaves opportunities for a dynamic fighter to capitalize upon. And that's what I'm counting on Ortega to be able to do. Get him to the ground at some point, get to a dominant position, and apply your amazing submission game to get the job done. So Ortega by submission. It would not surprise me for Lopez to take this because, like I said, Ortega is a guy who is falling apart and coming in interest. Like his last fight, he rolled his ankle before it even started against Yair Rodriguez. But I am going to go with Ortega by submission. He is the underdog. Lopez minus 180 to minus 190. Ortega plus 138 to plus 160. I think the betting public has a little bit too much faith in Diego Lopez at those odds. That being said, I mean, they could end up being right very quickly and very violently. So there is that. Then we have Daniel Zellhuber versus Esteban Ribovic. Daniel Zellhuber is a concerning fighter in the sense that he has no way to initiate the fight and get his game going. There's no way he has to impose himself on the fight. That being said, he's 6'1" with a 77-inch reach, which means most fighters have to come to him to actually get their own offense going, unless you're going to be Trey Ogden, who is pretty rare being a neutralizer and all. And Ribovic is aggressive combination pocket guy. He'll get violent. He'll come to Zellhuber. And that should lead to a pretty good fight where Zellhuber is throwing back, but being like a slightly better athlete and a more impactful striker. That means that he'll, be hitting harder, be hitting more, and probably take Ribovic to a decision because Ribovic is supremely tough. Like he's a very, 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 very tough guy. So I can see that being a thing. So Zellhuber should get the win here. It is good matchmaking if you just want to get Zellhuber a win because it doesn't test the core concern about him, but it is also a step up. So I think it's right on the money to get like a Mexican winner at UFC Noche. Zellhuber minus 225 to minus 235. Ribovic plus 175 to plus 190. Rolando Rodriguez, Ode Osborne is where I slightly taper off my interest in this card because it's a battle between two fighters I fundamentally do not trust for different reasons. Ode Osborne has the physical check marks that you want. He is fast, explosive, good power. Can be strong for 125, but it seems to come and go, and has a pretty well-rounded skill set. Like he can wrestle, he can strike, he can scramble. These are all good things, but he's a fundamental front runner. He fades and also doesn't respond terribly well to people aggressing onto him, and it just not working. So this has led to some very, very troubling performances, most notably to Jafel Filio recently, and also some chin issues with Tyson Nam and Manel Kopp knocking him out and other fighters hurting him in significant ways. So it's pretty concerning when cardio and durability might be the two biggest question marks over you. Rodriguez doesn't have cardio issues, doesn't have durability issues, but his game is very, very power-based. It feels like more at home at 205 or 185 or even heavyweight. He is a power puncher, power wrestler, power grappler type of guy. Bit foot slow, which is a big problem at 125. Not especially explosive or particularly capable of, actually fighting at a high pace, even though I do think he has the cardio for it. So it's led to some unimpressive wins on the regional scene where he's fought guys that, if you're UFC level and you have the athleticism he does, you should crush, and he doesn't do that. So I worry about both of them. And then from a matchup standpoint, you've got Osborne, who is much tall. Actually only an inch taller, but a lot longer. He's 5'7" with a 73-inch reach, which is insane. For comparison purposes, Rodriguez is 5'6" with a 65-inch reach. So it does feel like Osborne should be able to stay on the outside and be the better athlete and work at a higher pace until he starts to slow down. But he should have 2 rounds in the bank by then. And then he just has to kind of not get knocked out. So I'm very, very nervous because, like I said, I don't trust Osborne in any way. He's coming off a terrible performance. But I'm going to go with Osborne by decision. I just don't think Rodriguez has long-term viability at flyweight. If he was a bigger guy, I think he would have it because I don't think he's a terrible athlete. I don't think he's terrible technician anywhere, which usually is a good sign. It's just he has the wrong physicality for fighting at 125. And Osborne by decision is the pick. Rodriguez is the favorite, minus 135 to minus 150. Osborne plus 110 to plus 125. I get it. Like I said, terrible recent performance for your boy O'Day Osborne. And at the same time, most UFC fans and bettors probably have not seen Osborne or have not seen Rodriguez's less than impressive like regional scene fights, because in the UFC he's looked perfectly fine. I think he's just 1-0 if memory serves, but like it was a crushing victory over Dennis Bondar, who has his own heap of issues. Let's be honest. Then we have Irene Aldana versus Norma Dumont. This is another like kind of full disclosure one. I've been wrong on Norma Dumont fights a number of times. I fundamentally don't like the game that she puts together. Low pace, counter heavy, very back foot, doesn't implement herself, is very, very strong and hits pretty hard, but doesn't finish people, and kind of, can smother people. So like I like Aldana's like more high-paced, more violent, chaotic version of her game. And the fact that she is taller by 2 inches, longer by 1.5 inches, should mean that she doesn't have the standard problem Dumont has, or Dumont opponents have, which is being unable to implement their game. Like, she is longer, so she should be able to implement her kicking, her boxing, her punching. There is a chance that she ends up like with JDR, where Dumont just kind of took her down. Jermaine Durandamine, I mean by that, where she just got kind of taken down and smothered. But like, Aldana has a better scrambling game than JDR does. She has more of an idea of what to do when she's being wrestled. But she is takedownable. Mace Chiasson, Holly Holm. These are things. But yeah, I'm going to go with Aldana by decision. It's even money fight, minus 110 to minus 118 on Aldana, minus 105 to minus 112 on Dumont. Should be. It's a very close fight. But I think just in general, I'll just feel better if Aldana wins, because it's probably a more interesting fights for her going forward. Whereas Dumont is just kind of dull. Manuel Torres versus Ignacio Bahamondes is a violence fight. I love it. Torres brings big power, a pretty solid submission game, and he's just violent. Just violent, but he's also got 2 leg lock losses, which is a bit weird. Have we ever had a UFC fighter whose entire multiple loss category, I mean, it's only 2, but like, is all leg locks? It's a bit weird. I just don't like his chances, though, to actually implement his game here. Bahamondes is exceptionally long for the weight class. 6'3", 75.5-inch reach. It's insane engagement potential. And he's quite durable. I mean, he's been beaten by shorter guys before, John McDessie and Ludovic Klein. But like, Torres does not have the breadth of creativity or technique that either of those guys have. Like, his game is, I don't want to say a tall man's game, because it's not really. But like, he's 5'10". He's used to being taller and longer than most of his opponents and being able to just kind of be violent on them. So the fact that he's 2.5 inches shorter in reach and 5 inches shorter in height is going to be, I think it's going to be a problem for him, honestly. Like I talked about, like with Sean O'Malley and Merab Dvalishvili having like, that dynamic of like, you fought a guy this tall before? And in Torres's case, I think he has. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't see anyone known for being particularly tall here. I don't know. I just trust Bahamondes' athleticism a little bit more, and his extra range helps him out. He's a little bit safer defensively. Torres is very, very open to counter strikes and just getting hit in general. So I'm going to go with Bahamondes by decision. He's the safer pick, but a finish either way is on the table, and Torres is inherently violent. Torres is the favorite, minus 120 to minus 135. Bahamondes is minus 105 to plus 110. This is the other interesting one, because I thought for sure Bahamondes would be the favorite here. I know Torres is hot right now. He's 3-0 with 3 finishes in the UFC. Pretty cool. But Bahamondes is pretty good as well. And I hate to say this, but there's like significant flaws in everyone that Torres has beaten in the UFC. Like, he's beaten, let's see here, Frank Camacho, starts really, really slow. Nicholas Moda just has not managed to put everything together. And Chris Duncan, who is like very unathletic. So Yeah, I don't know. That's a weird one. I'm going to be betting on Ball Mondays at underdog odds. That's pretty cool. Yasmin Hauergui versus Ketlin Souza. This one's pretty cut and dry. Probably one of the back-to-back fights here that are just like very, very cut and dry that I don't really think are too deep. Hauergui is a proper prospect at 25 years old at 115. She's got solid combination boxing, fights at a high pace, solid takedown defense, seems to have all the athleticism you could want. Yeah, she's got that loss to Denise Gomes, but Denise Gomes is a pretty hard hitter and a pretty successful prospect herself. Souza's coming off a dominant win over Marnik Man, but Marnik Man is like the absolute worst fighter in this division, and she still couldn't finish her. So Souza is a pretty meh athlete with a decently well-rounded skill. She can strike, she can clinch wrestle, she can grapple, she can scramble. But there's nothing very good about her game, and I don't think she really even asks any questions of Hauergui. She'll try to take her down, obviously, but Hauergui is pretty good at not letting you clinch with her, and like I said, isn't easy to take down. So Souza, I don't know. Like there's just nothing there. Like I feel like Souza's just gonna get stuck fighting Hauergui's kind of like volume based pocket game, and she's an inferior athlete and inferior at the job. So yeah, Hauergui by TKO. Souza is vulnerable to an attritive striking attack and stoppage. Hauergui minus 480 to minus 520. Souza plus 350 to plus 390. She is the second largest dog on the card. We have not talked about the largest. And I think the largest is a bit retarded. But we'll get there. The other cut and dry fight is Edgar Chairez versus Joshua Van at flyweight. Joshua Van is taking this fight on super short notice and got KO'd less than 2 months ago. That is the only concern, though. He is a very legit prospect at 22 years old who kind of everything I just said about Hauergui applies to Van. Solid combination puncher with like good speed, builds into fights, gets more active as the fight goes on. Works at a high pace, creative combinations, does all that things. He gets his raids and he starts taking it over and he brings a good pressure game with counters. It's very nice. It's very lovely. And, he had that setback against Charles Johnson, but Charles Johnson is Charles Johnson. He's very, very good. So he has a lot of boxes ticked for being future contender. I do think the power is a little bit low, but like he also did finish Felipe Bunes. Edgar Chairez is this like really grab bag fighter with random tricks that I don't trust. He's not a terrible athlete by any means, but he's not an elite athlete. He was also slated to face Kevin Borges, who lost to Joshua Van. So by the logic of UFC matchmaking, is way below Joshua Van. I know that that's not necessarily something that holds up, but like, it is something to consider. Yeah, I mean, Chairez has got some dangerousness to him. He's got a little bit of power. He's got some submissions that he can latch onto, but like, I don't know. There's just not much of a game plan with him. And I think Van should probably torch him here to a decision. I know that sounds weird to say torch him to decision, but like, I mean, a very clear cut, obvious decision for Van. So that's my pick. He's minus 120, minus 220 to minus 250. That could be wider, honestly. Chairez plus 175 to plus 200. And then we come to the final fight, the opener, Raul Rosas Jr. versus Richie Lang. Weird placement on the card given that they are promoting Rosas Jr., but I guess I don't know really what I would put below it. I mean, I guess ideally it would have been Chairez versus Kevin Borges, but obviously that fight is off. There's not much to really talk about here. Raul Rosas Jr. is not a complicated fighter. He is a brute force grappler. He is going to go out there. He's going to try to take down a Richie Lang. He's going to try and show as little striking acumen as possible. And he's going to try and get the back take and the submission on Richie Lang. Richie Lang can be out wrestled. Basically, everyone who's tried to do so has done so, Johnny Munoz included, who is quite bad. And it's not an instant takedown. Like, he can wrestle. He's going to make you work hard. But, like, Rosas is an intense chain wrestler. He is not the sort of guy that gets put off by, like, the initial shot not working. Like, he will keep going for it. But I have to say this, Richie Lang is better than everyone that Raul Rosas Jr. has ever beat before by a significant margin, in the sense that he is a UFC level bantamweight. And I'm no disrespect to Ricky Gerasios, but I'm not sure that anyone that Raul Rosas Jr. actually has beaten is. So at the end of the day, I'm very nervous about like a minus 800 to minus 1,000 favorite in Rosas. Richie Lang coming back at plus 500, plus 650. I'll be betting on Arichi Lang. That being said, I am taking Rosas by submission. There's stylistic poison for Arichi Lang, even though he's more accomplished than Raul Rosas Jr. But like I said, anybody that has really tried to put Arichi Lang on the ground has had a fair amount of success doing it. And Rosas will try. He will doggedly try to make this happen. He's not going to entertain a striking battle with Arichi Lang unless Arichi Lang can force it upon him. So there you go. Not the most complicated of undercard, like I said. But anyways, that is it. Check out the links down below for my social medias, my video gaming stuff, and the MMA Discord. Fight Simulator. Boom. Check it out. Have a look over there. There you go. Down below. And I'll see you after the fights.